Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jacob here, Prairie Palms, El Dorado, Kansas, USDA Zone 6B. And as you can see, the sun is shining behind me. It looks like a warm, nice day out. However, this shows us otherwise. This is what's left of my Musa Baju bananas, and my castor plant, and my elephant ears. However, there's a sable minor right there, which I just planted in September, so that's why it looks kind of ratty, but it's still growing well, doing very well growing here. Last night was our first actual freeze of the season. 27 degrees was measured at the airport a couple miles from the house. I'm going to zoom in on the sable minor here. That new fan coming out there is just perfect shape. The new spear there, it's a very hardy palm. But yeah, the castor plant, I was hoping it would ripen enough to set seed, but that's not going to be the case, so I'll have to get some seed from a friend of mine to replant this next year. The bananas here, this is the hardiest banana in the world. I think the trunks might still be alive, so if it warms back up in a few days, we might get a little bit more growth out of these, but for the most part, they're ready to come down. These have been in the ground for 2 years now, and in the winter they'll die, and I cut them off, and I really don't do anything special with it. A lot of people will say to mulch. I don't really ever do that. And you wait till about March or so, and they'll come back from the ground, and this is one season of growth. These come up in March. That's one season of growth, and I'd say that's probably 11 feet easily. And the castor plant I planted in August, and it was about 6 inches tall when I planted it, and it got about 6 feet. And let's go look at some palms. So this beauty behind me, this is my Washingtonia robusta, otherwise known as the Mexican fan palm. They're native to Southern California and into northern Mexico. They're a somewhat cold hardy palm. I think they can tolerate around 22 degrees, 20 degrees probably is when they will damage pretty heavily. They'll die in the low teens. But this one's been in the ground since last summer, 2016, so it's been in the ground a year and a couple of months. And it did get a little damage. You'll see on these lower fronds last night, they're burned a little bit here. Being out in the middle of the yard, it probably got colder. I'd say probably 25 degrees here. But the middle fronds here are completely flawless. They look just the same as they did in July. This is a very fast growing palm. You can see it's almost as tall as I am. And it was only about 3 feet tall when I planted it in July of 2016. They grow very, very fast. What is special about this palm is I can cut all these fronds off, as I will later on in the season. I can cut all these fronds off and overwinter it like that. I'll just put a barrel over it, wrap some Christmas lights around it, and put a barrel over it. And then in the spring, you pull everything off, and it'll start growing again, and you'll have a full head of fronds in a couple of months. It's just a very, very, very fast-growing, beautiful palm. This is probably one of my favorites. This is a Trachycarpus fortunae, a Bulgarian form. One of the hardiest Trachycarpus palms there is. Trachycarpus as a genus is very hardy in general, but this one, it tends to be the hardiest from what has been experimented with. Very glossy color fronds, and it kind of creeps along the ground. You can see there the trunk kind of creeps along the ground for a while before it starts growing up, but from here it'll grow up. This was planted in September of 2015, and it was just getting its first fan leaves in, so it really started growing well this year. And it's seen very cold temperatures. Last winter was, I want to say, somewhere around 8 below zero for a night. And it just had a little bit of damage, but nothing terrible at all. And it survived, obviously. It's doing very well. This is a great palm for our zone, and I am selling some of these next spring, so I will have some of these available for sale next spring at Prairie Palms. And moving on, this is Sable Birmingham, which is thought to be an old cross between Sable Minor and Sable Palmetto, and I would probably believe that. I could say that's right. You can see the frond here has a split in it similar to Sable Minor right here. But if you look at it from above, it is becoming somewhat Costa palmate. It's got that fold down the middle of the leaf, which is very indicative of Sable Palmetto, and I believe it'll get more so as it ages. This palm was planted in April of this year from a 7-gallon. I bought this from Steve Anderson in Alabama. Very great guy to do business with. I highly recommend him. This wind has kind of beat it up a little bit here. That's why it's kind of rough looking around the edges, but no cold damage from last night's freeze. This is a very hardy palm as well. A friend of mine has one growing in Wichita. It's been there for probably 20 years with no protection. It's just starting to get a trunk on it. They'll get very, very large as time goes by. So Sable Birmingham's another great palm for south central Kansas. And next door we got a little needle palm here. Probably the hardiest palm in the world. And it's kind of the same story with the wind beating the crap out of this one as well. But you can look down here, there's no damage on this, which is not surprising at all. These things are very hardy. I've heard of them being down to 20 below zero and surviving. They're very hardy palms. And they will sucker. You got a pup coming up there. And a pup coming up there. And they will sucker, and you can divide those off and have separate palms. And they're very slow growing, but they do like a lot of water, and they pick up the speed with water. So this is needle palm, Rhapidophyllum hystrix. Probably the best palm for our climate. It will form a trunk, but it'll stay somewhat low to the ground and look shrubby unless you take those pups off of it. That's really the only way you get it to look like a true palm, is if you trim the pups off. And this is just a regular old Trachycarpus fortunei. This will require some protection in our climate, whether it be a nice microclimate or wrapping it. It's hardy to about 10 degrees probably without damage, and I'd say anywhere from 0 to 5 will kill it, depending on the duration of the freeze event, obviously. These are much faster growing than the Bulgarian form. They're also a little bit easier to get a hold of, but are a lot less hardy, as I said. Probably, I'd say confidently hardy to zone 7B is where you'd probably get away with growing these. This is a Trachycarpus fortunei, Chinese windmill palm. And then right here against the house I have a couple more dwarf palmettos, Sable Minors. There's one there and one there. And they've been in the ground for 2 years as well now. And they saw that 9 below zero last winter, which did some damage on them, but they came back very quickly. And they're still very young. They were planted as straplings. They will get hardier as they age. This is probably another one of the best palms for our climate, but it will not trunk. It'll stay low to the ground. You'll have probably about 7 feet once they get mature, and that's with lots of water and probably in partial shade. They'll get about 7 feet tall to the top of the fans. Excuse me. One of my favorites, just because of how truly tough they are. And over here we have Sabal mexicana. This is my smaller one. This is the one that I kind of neglect and experiment with. This one was unprotected last winter as well, and saw that 9 below 0, which burned it back to the growth point. It defoliated except for the spear leaf, and I'll show you what I mean by the spear leaf. So in growing palm trees, when we're talking about the spear leaf, we're talking about, if I can find it here, it's hiding back in there somewhere. I may not be able to show you one on this palm because it might, yeah, there it is. So when we're talking about the spear leaf on palm trees, we're talking about this right here. This is the newest emerging frond, and it did burn it all the way back to that last winter. And this is a trunking palm, native to southern Texas, down into Mexico, and even into Central America a little bit. Very hardy trunking palm. They will eventually get 50 feet tall over time. But I probably would not recommend leaving this palm unprotected every winter, as eventually it probably will decline over time unless we have, if you know, a normal winter's not going to hurt it. But here in the Midwest, a normal winter, there's no such thing. It can be, you can literally be in February, January, December, you can be 70 degrees one day and 10 degrees the next day, or even colder than that. It's those sudden cold snaps that have the tendency to really mess with growing palms here. So I would probably protect this one for as long as you can. Obviously, the more mature they get, the hardier they get. But I'm not going to call this confidently hardy to zone 6B. I'd say this is a 7B palm as well. It's definitely hardier than your Florida Sabal palmetto, but I wouldn't call it hardy to this zone by any stretch. But this is the Texas palmetto, Sabal mexicana. And over here, I call this my miracle palm. This is my Chamaerops humilis, a Mediterranean fan palm. And I planted this in April of 2016. I bought this as a birthday present for myself, from myself. Last winter, I just threw a pop-up tent over it, just a real thin tent, like you'd buy it. Well, it was a deer blind that you'd buy to hunt deer out of, just a pop-up one. And I threw that over it, and I didn't give it any heat or anything, so it saw the brunt of the cold. It was 9 below 0 as well, and all the fronds died, except for, once again, on this one, the spear stayed green at the bottom, but it looked dead, and I expected it to be dead, and I was shocked when it wasn't dead. But it came back, and it has just done nothing but thrive, and even the sucker survived on it, and that's really incredible. This is a very hardy palm. I'd call this a 7, probably a 7B as well. Once again, not really hardy to our zone without protection. Over time, you would need to protect it, or it is going to eventually meet its demise. But this is the European fan palm, or Mediterranean fan palm, Chamaerops humilis. And over here we have the Bootea eriospada, woolly jelly palm, native to South America, Argentina, down into Chile. This is one of the hardiest feather leaf palms. The other palms I was showing you have fan leaves. This one has the more typical palm tree frond structure. You can see here, you got your petiole here, and your leaflets that come off of it. This is a palmate, what we call a palmate palm. And as I said, this is one of the hardiest. It has 0 damage from last night. You can see no damage from last night. I have let this get down to around 12 degrees before, and it's been on the ground for almost 3 years now. Winter protection for this one, I pull the fronds up and I wrap them in a blanket, and wrap lights around the blanket, and then put a barrel over it. But I'll likely have to come up with something different this year, as it has grown so much that tied up, the fronds are probably pushing 5 feet now or more. maybe 6 feet. So it's definitely going to need a different form of protection this year. But this is a Bootea area spatha. And last but not least, this is kind of my pride and joy. This is my Sabal mexicana, like the other one, Sabal mexicana, Texas palm. But I kind of baby this one a little bit. I protect it real well. I let it go through one winter without protection, and it burned up pretty bad. But it survived, and it's done nothing but thrive. It's been in the ground almost 4 years now. It was planted as a 7-gallon palm in 2014, in early 2014. And no damage from last night's cold. Very hardy palm. See, it's well taller than me now. It's probably 6.5 feet tall. It's starting to get a trunk on it, and probably will next year, and it may very well flower next year. So I'm hoping for that. Very robust petioles down there. Well, this is probably my favorite palm, just for its hardiness and growth rate. For a Sabal, it's just outstanding. But, let's look at my palms here around the yard. It really is incredible what you can get away with here in Kansas. Here's a comparison of me with this guy right here. This is my favorite. This is my baby. And but it is incredible what you can get away with here, and people will tell you that you can't grow these palms here, but you very well can. And I want to see more people try it. And there's definitely a demand for these palms, and I'm trying to fill the void, so to speak, and cultivate hardy palms and make people aware of hardy palms. I feel like if people were aware you could grow these here, you'd be seeing more of them. And we are in Wichita. You drive around Wichita, there's several residential buildings that have needle palms, Sabal Louisianas, even at the Botanical Garden, there's Sabal Louisiana there. And I'm just trying to educate people on hardy palms. And if you want to grow hardy palms, there's so much information about them. It's becoming very widespread, and I hope next spring you'll check us out at Prairie Palms here in South Central Kansas. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.